I will talk to you later.
This is the state of the nation. Ibifa Uganda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry SSALI. It is August, Sunday 15th, 2021. Welcome to the State of the Nation. My name is Henry SSALI. Before we start, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Again, my name is Henry SSALI. This is the State of the Nation. Today we have in studio, we do have two important voices joining us to engage in this discussion. Dr. Lina Zedriga is here with us.
Yes, good morning, good evening.
As well as my colleague, Julius Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali. I'm going to start with Dr. Lina. Welcome back to the State of the Nation. Pleasure to have you. Tell us what's going on in Kampala.
Thank you so much.
Uganda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sally, and my colleagues. I want to say I'm very honored. I don't take this for granted. I have just been on the road, but I am excited to be here and very energized. Uganda, well, there are lots of uncertainties, but of course, people always are very resilient. We are still moving on. We are still alive. We thank God for that. And today is the feast day of the Assumption. And Mary miraculously assumed, went into heaven, and I am a believer. So there are miracles also still happening, and she's watching over us. Thank you.
Happy feast day of the Assumption.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Henry. As usual, nice to see Dr. Zedriga back. You've been missing in action. I know you are a very busy person, but it's always nice to have you back here. And yes, greetings to all of you, people of the world, my fellow Ugandans, colleagues, and everybody that is associated with this program in one way or another. It's a pleasure to be here as usual. I'm looking forward to yet another beautiful conversation, as we do always have these conversations every Sunday afternoon. Thank you very much, Henry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali, and welcome back. Last weekend, we took a break. We weren't here. We all had to rest a bit and refocus the conversation.
Yes.
But even though we missed last week weekend, the conversations continue. The most prominent one lately is that of Kenyan Deputy President William Ruto. And of course, you're going to be discussing the cosy relationship, which has lately come to the fore, of course, brought to the fore by many Kenyan leaders as they head into the 2022 presidential polls. Many things have been said. A lot of stuff has been said regarding what's going on. Some people have characterized Mr. Ruto as a Ugandan who wants to take over the Republic of Kenya, and warning their without warning, they are distant. They are citizens of his intentions as he prepares to organize a campaign to take over Kenya as potentially the next president of the Republic of Kenya. But before we delve into that conversation, there were some certain things that happened over the last week, and I want to give Dr. Zedriga an opportunity to talk about that audio, or that audio that came out, so that she can set the record straight. I know she was quoted out of context, apparently, based on the information I've received and based on the information that she has released in one of her public apology. Dr. Zedriga, what happened, and do you want to talk about that or no?
Very briefly, so that it doesn't derail us. Yeah. We had a citizens conversation. It was, I think, the 39th podcast done by Idea, and we were on it with the Kennedy of the Forum for Democratic Change. And so it was 1.5 hour thing. We had a conversation on a number of issues, even including my background and my husband, including the state of the opposition in Uganda. 1.5 hours. So that happened like 4 weeks ago, and then it was released early this week. And somebody decides to just have that one clip of when he did not, get it holistically from when Kennedy soiled my president so much, and then allowed me to talk. Not even allowing, I actually had to, struggle to talk. So in that process, amid the other conversations, I hope you will go online. It was about comparison. It was about, who is pitched best and stuff. Of course, as a political party, I had to come in when my president had been called all kinds of names. Okay, all kinds of names, and I don't want to report it. To repeat it here because it's already online. And then when I responded and said it was about who is pitched best. Okay, so I did that, and that clip was only maliciously cut from my side, not even transiting it from Kennedy. So it was as if I stood and I was on something, and then I started, releasing all this in response. But then it is pitched as if it wasn't in response. 1, 2. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Besigye. My husband, who is missing up to today, in 2001, I even talked about that, and this person did not include it.
Right.
Zedriga colleagues Darius was top on his campaign team, and he went missing around the same time with Dr. Besigye. Okay, until today he's still a missing person. If I was malicious or disrespectful, there are things that would have gone out, how I've struggled with the children and stuff, but I am not. And besides, his wife is my very good friend. I follow her a lot. That is Engineer Winnie Byanyima. So it was a response in context. So it was malicious. Right. Of course, today's preaching was around that the devil is actually on the internet, and we should be careful from EWTN that we must always pray before you say anything, because the devil is prying around and confusing. Especially, in fact, I laughed when that priest was preaching. So it is something, now portrayed as if I'm very disrespectful of a doctor and so on. So it is a total misrepresentation, and I really have put that apology for the good of our relationships, and we are all forces of change. And yeah, for the good of the struggle. He is my neighbor here. Yes. He's my neighbor here in Kasangati. So I have a lot of respect for Doctor, and I know him even beyond, the political party things. And so since 2000 that's when I really knew him quite well. And a lot of the Forum for Democratic Change now, but then change reform agenda. He used to come to my house and would serve him. But of course, many things also went wrong. My husband is a missing person up to today. But I am not bitter. I am not. It was in response, but cut maliciously and out of context. And for that, I actually apologized that maybe I should not even have responded to this guy who was rattling over my president. Maybe.
I think the most important thing. I think the most important thing is that you have mentioned everything. First of all, you said that you have a lot of respect for Dr. Bessie.
A lot. Yes.
And secondly, you made a public apology, something that is very.
I did, and from my heart. I did it deliberately today so that Mother Mary is my witness.
Exactly.
I could have done it yesterday, but I said no. Let me do it today.
Yeah, that is something that is rare in Ugandan politics. So I applaud you for doing that, and I'm gonna put it on record to dismiss all the misconceptions and misrepresentation of facts that were made against you. I saw a lot of a couple of politicians, prominent politicians, trying to dismiss you, and it's good that you have come and used your own voice to put in context what you said, and that whoever decides to make any analysis should always try to contextualize that conversation. So thank you so much.
And we were with this. I was responding to Kennedy of FDC. It was a conversation on a range of issues in Uganda.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So why don't we turn to Mr. Ruto and his relationship to Mr. Museveni. Before we start, I'm going to play this video. I think these are some of the inceptions of the relationship. Of course, I have a couple of videos to play, but let us first start with this one.
It's a chilly morning in Kapchorwa town, but this did not tire residents from streaming to the municipal grounds to listen to the NRM presidential candidate Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who was holding the second leg of campaign rallies in Sebei sub-region. The president arrived at the municipal grounds at about 2 p.m. with Kenya's deputy president, William Ruto, in the same car, amid his cheers from the people. He was welcomed by district leaders and later adorned with leaves to signify blessings by the elders who wished him good luck in the campaign. President Museveni then invited Ruto to address the people. The Kenyan deputy president is making his second visit to Uganda since October, where he was fast for 3 days. Ruto, whose home is in Eldoret across the border with Sebei land, came with a delegation of other Kenyan leaders. Ruto, who spoke the same dialect with the Sebei, then took the campaign podium and urged the voters here to stick with President Yoweri Museveni because he is the one who would guarantee their future and social advancement.
Mi gore ne kimiyu ne gi bobik chop ko go ngalal ji bayanda ni asoko tare tej owe gore ne gi omenye enyu bare yu asgiwe kwa gore asoko bi obayisye anyeitya ori belago agotege emengo.
He then switched to English and repeated the same message, this time targeting the youth. The Kenyan deputy president told the young people that they have a long future ahead and should not vote for someone who would ruin it.
Young people must be at the forefront to vote for leadership that will guarantee peace and stability so that we can build our economy, expand opportunities for young people so that we can eliminate poverty and create jobs.
Ironically, early when addressing a joint press conference with President Yoweri Museveni at Kapchorwa State Lodge, Ruto said he had not come to campaign for President Yoweri Museveni.
I think President Museveni has been campaigning in Uganda for a very long time. And he has sufficient experience. And he has sufficient knowledge. I do not think he requires the support of Kenyans to campaign for him to be elected by the people of Uganda. So I think we better focus on the things that are important. The decision as to who is elected in Uganda is for the people of Uganda to decide.
Therefore, when Deputy President Ruto comes here, he is supporting the ideology of the NRM, which is nationalism in Uganda and Pan-Africanism in Africa.
Addressing his first campaign rally in Kapchorwa, President Museveni listed his government's achievements and pledged.
All right. Why don't we start with that conversation? That was a campaign, the 2015 campaign, of course, when Ruto came and publicly campaigned for Mr. Museveni, even though he was trying to distance himself from the campaign itself. Of course, we all see that he campaigned for him. He could speak the language in Sebei. I wonder what your thoughts are towards what people in Kenya have intimated about Mr. Ruto's intentions and closeness to Mr. Museveni. What are your thoughts about that clip that we just played from NTV? Dr. Zedriga, why don't we start with you, and then, of course, Mitala will come in later.
Yes, I don't know the timing, how many minutes we have each, but of course, that time, 2015, for some reason, by the way, that campaign found me physically in Kapchorwa. Oh. I was running a project for stakeholders on children in contact with the law in Kapchorwa. So it is so vivid to me. And you remember also that time I was a candidate for the parliamentary elections. It was, and he has continued, by the way. He has continued. Recently, he was here in our neighborhood and saying Museveni is a very good mentor. And when you read the language, it's he's a very good mentor, and people here are very blessed and lucky. Of course, that is invoking an allegiance. It is an invitation of showing his commitment and also seeking his support, seeking his support. Yes, seeking his support, because this is a political confession box, if I may call it like that. It's where, yes, and if it's like a field, a football field, it is now the season for the premiers and so on and so forth. So if it's a football game, he has shown that he is the cheerleader. He is the cheerleader for President Museveni, and also the timing, especially for his successful private visits, and the one that recently did not happen. In fact, it shows he is learning and learning and relearning from Museveni. That is, he's in a way he's saying, please, I'm here. I would like you to coach me. I would like you to mentor me. I would like you to support me. I would like you to escort me. You are my mentor. Okay, you are the best of the best I have sought out. So he is seeking and getting that support absolutely in his bid for the presidential election. Of course, in another clip also, our comrades from Kenya.
There's more that I'm going to be sharing. There's more that I'm going to be sharing. But
so this is an open declaration that please take me on, and I am fully on board. But with his own interest, in his own interest. Yes.
Thank you very much, Henry. Thanks, Dr. Zedriga, for that observation. Very interesting times here. And for me, I think I'm happy that the Kenyans have reacted to Mr. Ruto the way they have reacted. Because I think if you read the commentary that's coming from Kenya, the Kenyans are absolutely putting their heads up and they are saying, no, this is not going to happen on our watch. It's really interesting. I was listening to a politician, a prominent politician in Kampala recently on one of the radio stations, and a question was posed to her, and her response was kind of very very instrumental in kind of trying to understand, the character of Mr. Museveni as a person. I think these are things anyway that are on public record. Mr. Museveni doesn't. I think he doesn't respect friendship. If I should put it that way, he's a person who cannot be trusted very much. His record is very clear on things of that kind. If you go back, some of the agreements that he has made and he has breached, himself. And I think himself, he has been on record to say that, he's very quick, to conjure up these kind of relationships of convenience. I do feel sorry for Mr. Ruto, because I think he's likely to find himself, isolated and in a deep end. And that's not to forget that he already has quite a lot of problems that are running in the background. For your information, the case against him at the ICC has never gone away. It's still hovering over his head. Everybody who is Dr. Zedriga here will be able to make a submission on that if she may. That case, he was not acquitted. The case was discontinued because there was lack of, or because there was weak evidence. And actually, two of the judges in that particular case, they were very clear that there had been issues of, tampering, witness tampering. And although the case was considered to be weak, the judges felt that it was not appropriate at that time to go for a verdict of acquittal that would have made Mr. Ruto completely free of any allegations of involvement in the sorts of things that were raised at the ICC. So that is still hovering over his head. And if you look around, the environment in which Mr. Ruto is operating, we've got Bashir in Sudan. Mr. Museveni himself is not very secure. You saw his speech yesterday. He seems to be kind of amending, adjusting his positions very slowly, because now I think he's beginning to understand or to realize that, the sorts of things that have been put against his name are quite very, very serious. And they go very deep, even to the point where he may leave office. Some of these allegations might have very severe and very serious consequences. But to be precise, I think Mr. Ruto is put himself in a very difficult situation. I think he's going to lose legitimacy in his own home country, because I believe that the Kenyans will never be able to accept it. Mr. Museveni is not a person to be looked up as a model for democracy and democratic government, to be honest. I think his style of government is not one that can be respected, in the region. Kenya politics has, by and large, been kind of a higher standard, than our politics. They're a little bit more politically mature, and you can see the sorts of reaction that are coming from there. The people are they are appalled. They cannot believe that a person of the stature of the deputy president can lower himself, to that standard. But I think something that's more bigger than that is, there's a clear interference with the elections in another country, and that is something that is really, really, really serious. In America, Trump spent the entirety of his administration, the 4 years he was president. He spent all the 4 years fighting, trying to fend off that allegation that was continuously pumped against him, that he was helped by the Russians to come in government. Now, is this how Mr. Ruto would like his campaign to be run? I don't know, but it's interesting. There's going to be more conversation around this subject. I think it's very interesting. But bottom line is that I am happy that the Kenyans have come up very clearly, and they have said, or they have given the impression that they are not impressed. And because they are looking at Mr. Museveni as not their model that can be, translated into their own, elective politics. And I think that is kind of very interesting for me.
Of course, when you see someone who is alleged to be a dictator, someone who is alleged to be torturing his people, and also administering blatant killings, like similar to one that happened on 18th and 19th of November 2020, when you see citizens of another country crying and struggling so hard to dislodge a president who has been governing over them for over 3 decades. You do not want to associate with a person like that. But Ruto might tell you that I only went to Uganda to inspire trade and integration, as you can see in this video. But I'll see what you have to say about this.
Trade is one of the activities that will drive relations and politics between countries, says Deputy President William Ruto. Speaking in Kampala during a meeting with members of the private sector in Uganda, the Deputy President challenged his fellow leaders to work progressively and consistently to establish a 5-member trading bloc to facilitate the region's economy.
When we talk about EAC, we are looking at 6 countries, 170 million people, a GDP of about $165 billion.
The Deputy President also noted that with challenges of youth unemployment and poverty, leaders should work towards improving cross-border commerce.
Every business person and entrepreneur must be pushing where the numbers are. We need to be pushing to EAC, to TFTA, and eventually to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That is where we must go.
Ruto also held talks with President Yoweri Museveni, where he focused on trade between Kenya and Uganda, as well as integration issues in East Africa. The leaders appreciated the fact that there was need to create a more favorable environment to enhance commerce between 2 countries. Meanwhile, the Deputy President received the 2018 Life Achievement Award in Kampala. The award is given to young achievers who excel in various disciplines. He challenged young people to take up their position in the society to drive change.
The idea that Africa must learn to celebrate and validate her own rather than wait for external approval by others is a liberating mindset which I fully endorse.
For Channel 1 Weekend, I'm Emily K. Bade.
Of course, that's a video by KBC from Kenya. When Ruto says that I only got to Uganda to inspire trade and integration, do we have the audacity to question his relationship with Mr. Museveni? Well, Mr. Mitala, start with that conversation, and then I'll end with Dr. Zedriga.
I want to respond to that question a little bit more seriously, because there is a pattern that has been developing over time. It's a terminology that is used so it's been seen so much in Western politics, and I think a few times in Hong Kong, in Italy, in Russia, and things like that. It's a terminology that medically means sleaze in politics. Should we be concerned about the development of sleaze in politics? Sleaze technically means corruption, you know. People of immoral character, people of sordid character, people who ought to be disrespected, people who ought not to be given any form of respect or shape or space to participate, you know, in civic government, you know. So there is that aspect of sleaze in politics. And I think for me, that is really important. I think this is where you begin to find, you know, people in government lobbying, you know, in a rather very, very unethical manner, you know. I'll give you an example. The former Prime Minister of the UK here, Mr. David Cameron, is currently facing hot waters because when he left government as Prime Minister, he went and took up an advisory role for a multi-millionaire kind of organization, smallest kind of a bank, you know, that is lending, you know, people, you know, to do business. But the question that has been raised is that, you know, how do you protect, you know, the public good from corrupt tendencies, especially when people of highly connected kind of networks involve themselves with mafia-like kind of tendencies, and they tend to capture state power. These are the sort of things that we have seen in South Africa. You know, former President Jacob Zuma is being facing, or is still facing, corruption charges, you know, over things like that, things that he did while he was in government. And for me here, I sense a trend that Mr. Ruto is going into there. You know, that sleaze in politics, you know, corruption, embezzlement, stealing of public funds, and so many. I mean, read about Mr. Ruto. He's involved in lots of shoddy kind of business arrangements in Kenya. And this is where the other issue comes in. I want anybody who's watching us today, right now, to go onto the internet and Google in the word "know your country" and type in Kenya or Uganda. These are things that relate to money laundering and those kind of washing money, criminal money exchanging hands.
Right.
Obviously, if you look at Uganda, and I've got the website up here, Uganda is currently listed as it's coming up as and I want to read this for you so that I can be very, very clear on that. According to the financial, what is it called? I wrote it down here. It's the Financial Action Task Force. This an international organization that monitors aspects and incidences of money laundering. It's identifying Uganda as having very serious anti-money laundering deficiency kind of problems. There are structural issues that need to be done in Uganda, you know, to secure and to make sure that the risk of, you know, money laundering that is associated with Uganda is taken care of. Kenya is not on the deficiency list, whereas Uganda is on the deficiency list. Now, another key thing that's coming into play here, Mr. Ruto is being accused, and you can read all the press, you know, the Kenyan press is a little bit more robust. They are not scared of saying things because they like our journalists in Kampala who are under the squeeze. The Kenyan journalists are kind of more free to say things that are critical of their leaders. Mr. Ruto, I think, as some of the reports that have come up, they are suggesting that he's been linked to a young Turkish kind of young man who is who's got a tag of financing terrorism and money laundering.
Wow.
You know,
wow.
And I think this is where the Kenyan intelligence service got interested. You know, Mr. Ruto was blocked from coming to Uganda recently.
Yes, recently.
You know? Yes. If you read the intelligence, if you read the press, everything is on the internet. You can read up the news, and you need to go for stories, for newspapers that are credible. Of course, there are people who might write stories that are laughable, but there are people who write stories and they are credible. But these issues are all up there, and they are being cited. That, you know, the reason why the Kenyan intelligence services got interested in this issue is because the connections with which Mr. Ruto is moving around with, they have been linked to money laundering and financing of terrorism, you know, in that region, you know. So obviously, whereas Kenya is not on the list, is not identified by the Financial Action Task Group as having deficiencies in money laundering, Uganda is identified as having serious deficiencies. So the connection is not very difficult for anybody to make there. Where would it be easy for criminals to operate? It's possibly going to be more likely to happen in Uganda. And I'm not surprised that these sorts of things are turning out the way they are turning. But I think as a country, we need to be very careful with these sorts of things because they are damaging our reputation so badly.
Right.
They are damaging our reputation as a country so badly, you know. And I think the leadership needs to take these matters kind of very seriously. So there is lots of issues coming from that direction. And anybody who is interested in following these stories, you can use up your research, you know, indexes, and the information will be at your fingerflops. So those are some of the feelers that I'm getting, and it would be nice to look further into those sorts of issues and try to understand what do they actually mean for us, Uganda, as a country, you know.
Dr. Zedriga, your thoughts about that?
Well, I worked in Kenya for quite some time. I was a technical advisor to that gender, the Commission on Gender. And some of the things associated with what Ruto is, the deputy president is doing right now. I had some experience when we were going to Mombasa and we were going for consultations. There would be fleets of, properties, and this is his, the other one is his, the other. So I already had that experience of him being a business person. So he comes also very strongly as not only a political entrepreneur, but a business entrepreneur. And it's very, I'm happy that the people of Kenya are watching. They are not only watching, but they are pointing this out. They are not only pointing it out. He was recently blocked from coming to Uganda. So that political transactional identity is very, 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 very strong in Ruto. And that's why he would therefore like to see how best to position him in that regard. Instead of being in Kenya and getting the pitching himself as the presidential candidate, and Uganda is not even any of the constituencies. Why would he be always interested in coming to Uganda if it's not for political pitching in utmost, not the best of the interests of the nation as Kenya, but his personal interest. So for us, the lesson as from Kenya is that Kenyans are not taking it hands down. They are not. Much as he's eating his own words. One time you see in Kapchorwa, you see recently he is pronouncing himself about Museveni being the mentor, the best of the best in the region and Africa and the world. And then in Kapchorwa vote him because, and then all of a sudden he says he's coming to Uganda for business or whatever interest. Anybody can, even the nursery kids can know that this is not really the truth. He is just trying to, I do not even know why, unfortunately, he stated that. I don't know.
Right.
Because it's very glaring, it's on record, it's everywhere that his is about pitching himself for political positioning. It is very, very, very glaring. Yeah.
But it's very interesting for me, when you see vice president of a neighboring country, stepping into another country and actively participating in an electoral process. Yeah. That is not being seen before, Well, maybe politicians may tend to do it at a local level, but not at national level. I think that's gross. And I think
it's very gross. It even touches on that whole constitutional provision of sovereignty of the state. Okay, is he now part of that? We have a Uganda, sovereignty of the state. He totally breached it. Yeah, where are we? We have been invaded by a political machinery. We were invaded by a political machinery. Where is our sovereignty?
Where is our sovereignty? In 1 minute, let us come back in 1 minute.
Okay.
And we are going to talk about the sovereignty issue when he was given, one of the institutes was named after him, the Leadership Institute was named after him.
This is the state of the nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry SSALI.
Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto today unveiled a plaque on the site where the institute will be built. He was accompanied by Frank Tumwebaze, the newly appointed Minister for Gender, Labour and Social Development. The meeting also featured the State Minister for East African Affairs, Major General Kahindo Tafire, and talk soon turned to politics. Kahindo Tafire narrated his history at Makerere.
Those of you who are in Ubumba, we are responsible for the culture of fighting, of freedom fighting, that pervades Rumba Hall. and I'm glad you've kept it alive, albeit with a bit of confusion. For us, we were very clear about what we wanted. At that time, we didn't have any other means of changing government except armed struggle. Right now, we have means of changing government by the ballot box. That's why I would like to invite colleague politicians, instead of demonstrating in town, going to disturb market vendors, come to the university and engage in debate.
The institute is planned to draw on the core strength of the diversity of disciplines and experiences to develop and refine leadership and development in Africa.
We have, got stuck with these anachronistic ideas of sovereignty. Your Excellency, allow me to tell you that sovereignty in poverty is poverty of sovereignty.
On his part, Ruto says the institute will collaborate with similar institutions in Africa to deepen the understanding of Africa in all its complexity and evolve common perspectives on global issues.
Indigenous knowledge and innovations that are appropriate to local communities must take precedence over copy and paste imports.
Ruto says the idea of a united East African community is an asset due to its shared values like bargaining power.
We need to think of how we are going to use scale to be able to bargain better for ourselves. I'm looking forward to the day when we will have a coalition between Jubilee and NRM to create East Africa's largest political party that will drive the integration of our sub-region.
However, the site at which this initiative has been launched had previously been offered to former Kenyan President Mwai Kibaki for construction of a library in 2015. The Vice-Chancellor, Barnabas Nawangwe, explained the matter.
There has been a little bit of breakdown of communication between ourselves and the office of the third president of Kenya. But that is not fatal because we still have land at Makerere.
The construction of the William Ruto Leadership Institute here at Makerere University is expected to start in January 2020. As of today, President Yoweri Museveni has pledged $100,000, approximately 360 million Uganda shillings. Walter Mwesije, NTV, Makerere.
Right. Dr. Zedriga will be joining us shortly. But your thoughts, Mr. Mitala Muzukuru wa Mswangali. Should we be excited about the William Ruto Leadership Institute? Is that the man that we should be looking up to for leadership as Ugandans?
You know, as a person who is interested in studying and information and research and things like that, I think those sorts of initiatives, they've got value to them. You know, if you take it at face value, they've got some sorts of value. I mean, you go to Uganda and there's a clear absence of spaces where people can be able to go and enrich themselves, in terms of libraries, public facilities and things like that. And I was at Makerere University for a couple of years as an undergraduate law student. And I remember my experiences there, how difficult it was, to even be able to go to the main library to look up some, academic kind of literature for you to prepare, for your lectures and stuff like that. So there is a value to that, and I wouldn't really dismiss it. But I think, where all this thing is coming from, where the anxiety is coming from is that what really lies behind these initiatives, how genuine are the people behind them, that we can be able to trust that what they are providing it, for the public good,
I think the question is not really about the issue is not really questioning the institute in itself or the initiative of an leadership institute in itself. The issue is in the role or the name that we have chosen to name that so-called leadership institution. But also, I want you to piggyback on the comments that he made regarding Jubilee and NRM coming together to create the strongest and biggest political party in East Africa. So when you talk about intentions, piggyback on those.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've heard one of the speakers in that clip. He was talking about sovereignty and poverty and sovereignty. Very interesting subject. But I want to return to the issue that I raised earlier about this whole idea of sleaze in politics and how these politicians, people who are highly powerful, connected, how they are clicking up together, you know, to take advantage of the state, capture the state for their own benefit, other than for the benefit of the public good. Because that's for me, really, that's really the gist of the matter. You know, these people they have cultivated a culture of inequality and exclusion. You know, where if you do not belong in that clique, and actually. It's interesting because when Ruto was blocked from coming to Uganda, one of the things that he said it in rather in a sad way, that, you know, children of the rich are stopping others from accessing the benefits of the state. I really did not understand in what context he was saying that. Because, I mean, look around and see, you know, where the level of inequality and exclusion that these guys are promoted while they have occupied public office is alarming, is insane, you know. It's absolutely insane, you know. You talk about things like you know, that clique, that mentality has promoted military dictatorships.
Yeah,
they have eroded democratic practice, you know. They have cultivated an environment of, you know, absolute impoverization of the masses, you know. I don't see of what benefit these people are really adding, you know, to the public good. I mean, for me, I'm really very, very uncomfortable, and I think it goes to demonstrate that when you hear political integration is a good integration, and I think I give an example. There are so many markets, you know, that have been able to benefit from the aspect of integration. The European Union here, I'm a very ardent advocate of the European Union, even though Britain has now left the EU, but there were clear benefits of it. But I think one of the key areas where Europe was able to see benefit was that aspect of creating a kind of free economy where people were able to move goods and services from one country to another, the prosperity that it brought on Europe. So there is obviously a case to be made for the integration of East Africans and Africans as a whole. Nobody really in their sober mind would question that. But
I do question the notions of political integration, especially in the East African context, where the person on the ground has not been explained how that political integration is going to help them. Someone who cannot even procure a passport for themselves, because either they cannot afford it or they have no use for it. When you talk about political integration to a landlord in Chanamkaka who has never owned a passport, but who is likely to lose their land to a rich guy who is coming in from either Kenya or Tanzania or Rwanda to buy him or her of their land because of the benefits of political integration.
And sadly, actually, that is probably what Mr. Ruto represents, because I mean, a very quick look up on who the man is in terms of his business empire and, you know, sort of activities there. He's been accused of being a land grabber in Kenya. You know, he acquired public property without going through the due process. You know, I think there was a time when actually Kenyans came up in arms and they said, you know, this guy was being given like a free access to public land without any contestations whatsoever. So there are those problems. And when you hear Mr. Ruto making reference to the fact that he wants this grand idea of the national resistance movement aligning itself with the NAT, I think what he has in mind is the Jubilee alliance that brought him into the position of the vice presidency in the first place. I think that's what he's looking at. Maybe then we would have an enterprise where we have Mr. Museveni as president and then Mr. Ruto as the vice president, and that clique of very corrupt people who have been at the helm of government for years and years while they are creating havoc for the rest of the mankind. And I think there is very serious anxiety about that. But
let's hear from Dr. Zedriga. Dr. Zedriga, your thoughts about that? And
yes, thank you. I went off a bit, we have issues, so I went off a bit. But what I got when I returned, actually the network went off when Otafaya was speaking about him being the author and the team, and it was because now those kind of blatant, it. Sometimes even I'm like, really, should we be talking about some of these things? Anyway, we really have to interrogate these things. We really have to. So when Ruto talks about that political alliance, it of course is not reflective of this woman in Arivu. Boloko Foko, of this young boy who is selling Kavera in that Kampala market across So what is the role of the state and their leadership to the citizens? You cannot just be alone and you want to grab all these things and run with it, and to the exclusion of all others. Like, Lord Pence has described the legal marriage. It's a union between two people to the exclusion of all others. State governance, participation of every person is very critical. Look at the state of our service delivery, if there's any service delivery at all. In that clip, which was doctored, I actually spoke about when the times we went to school, when the leadership was servant leadership, pro-people, progressive, transformational. To say schools would only go we even would find mattresses and blankets in school. But now look at what is happening. Things have degenerated so much. Look at the state of the hospitals. And I actually in that very clip said dead bodies for people to die was a very rare thing. So if a dead person, but now you see the kind of things with the COVID notwithstanding.
Right.
Institutions have totally degenerated. And in any case, there are three arms of government. Whether in Kenya or in Uganda, there's the judiciary, there's the parliament, there's the other arms of government. Where are they? Where are they in all this conversation? Where are their voices? What is their position? And what is the authority? What is the authority? What is his authority of crossing around, and what is it? What is the legal framework in all these things? Did it go through parliament? Has it gone through? So everything, I totally agree with my colleague that the exclusion is real, the impoverishment is real, and they seem not even to care a bit about whatever is happening, so long as they are comfortable. The transactional politics, the exclusive politics. And it's very, very dangerous, because the late Mwalimu Nyerere, may his soul rest in peace, said, if you fail to cater for the very many citizens who are poor, if you fail to cater for them, how are you going to plan to protect the few, these few who are concocting this alliance? How are you going? And now, right now, it's like, okay, successfully here in Uganda for us, the stealing has gone ahead, and the swearing in was, and life is turning to normal. It's not. People are very, very angry. The silence is pregnant with interpretation. But in fact, we do not even as citizens need to be angry to be participating in our and to get the right services. It is not a favor that is owed to the citizens of Uganda and Kenya. It's a duty. It's an utmost duty. And that fact, in other advanced places, a number of our people would have resigned, actually, by the way, because, yeah, they would have resigned from. But then, how do we as citizens then not respond, but prevent it from being manifested and implemented in practice without us, and to our exclusion, and of course to our detriment? It's not only the exclusion, it's even to our detriment, degenerating all this and driving us to a state of hopelessness. It brings to my face, yesterday I met a lady, an elderly lady. She was going to a hospital, a health center okay? And she did not even have the two, and I was dressed in a certain, so she thought I was a nun. She said, "Sister, I'm going to the hospital. I've not even eaten anything for 2 days." Yesterday, that is the state of desperation citizens have been. Majority, by the way, this is not an isolated case. This is not. And I'm sure also many of you, because of these transactional alliances, the mails you get for our burial, for our medication, they are just enormous. Should that really be allowed to continue when people are doing transactions, political transactions, and it is going with a lot of money, whether the money is dirty, whether it's whatever? So it's time really the awareness, civic education, civic engagement has to be taken into consideration deliberately.
Right. I think I just want to respond very quickly to what Mr. Otafile was saying, that when they went to take up armed struggle against the government, they had no other alternative, really. I think that's really questionable, and it's not very honest when he speaks like that, because he himself, he knows very well that they went to the bush just immediately after an election. They didn't even wait for the court to pronounce itself on whether the election had been free or fair, and they decided to take up an armed struggle against a legitimately, elected government, So those sorts of things are just sad to hear from people who lack, the sincerity to speak, to Ugandans with sincerity and explain exactly what the problems have been, so that we can be able to forge, a way forward in a respectful manner that respects each other's views. Interesting times. That's all I could say. It's just interesting times, very interesting times. But I think what is really lacking in this whole thing is it's a question of leadership. I think we need to bring back, very high ethical standards of serving in a public in a public kind of atmosphere. If you hold a public office, I think people need to be held, to the highest degree of scrutiny, which is what the Kenyans are doing to Mr. Ruto at the moment. They have decided to look into every aspect of his transactions, and I think, the other issue that comes to my mind is that when Mr. Ruto comes to Uganda the way he does, is he coming there as an individual, or is he coming there on behalf of the government of Kenya? Because at the moment that doesn't seem to be very clear. There is a very clear rupture in relationships between Mr. Ruto and President Kenyatta. So at this point in time, the question maybe that would be raised is when Mr. Ruto comes to Uganda, especially now that it has transpired that he is actually even coming without the authorization of the civil service. Because unlike in Uganda, where everything happens in State House, Kenya seems to have a more kind of streamlined kind of civil service structure. Because I think that if the situation we have in Mr. Ruto's situation, if it had been reversed and it was our vice president, now the army. I don't know her name, but I know she's a serving, army officer. I think if that situation was reversed and it was our vice president who found themselves in that situation, there would be a call that would have come direct from somebody from above, order from above, you know, and irrespective of what all the other government formal structures would have been saying, it would have been waved through as a VIP, and the journey would have continued, you know. So there is a question of leadership here, you know. This centralization of all authority in an individual without respect to, because what in tandem what that does is that it destroys administration,
right?
Because nobody, and I've always been of the view, and I've already stated this, that I do not believe for any particular reason that we do not have competent civil service people in our departments, people who are committed civil servants. I don't believe that we do not have those. I think we are not short of people like that. We have people who are very qualified, people who are very competent, but people have been disabled. You sit in an office, you hold a ministry, but you do not have the authority to do anything in that docket, because the power actually does belong to a clique of people somewhere who make the decision, you know, without going through the due process, without going through the lawful mechanisms. And this is what is making government and administration so difficult. It's what's making people so frustrated, you know, because it would be, imagine yourself if you are the CEO of a government parastatal. You know, you've got a mandate. The parastatal has got a mandate to carry out certain functions, you know, for the benefit of the people. And then your powers, your authority, they get, you know, they get watered down by a call from above. What are you left with in that kind of situation? So for me, so me, there's that question of leadership. And I think I want to say, at the risk of appearing to repeat myself over something that I've said here again and again, that until Uganda resolves the question of leadership, we are going to be at that junction for so many years, and we shall continue making this, we shall continue having these beautiful conversations, we shall continue to say all the sorts of things that we say, but until the question of leadership and respect for public service has been restored into our systems, then we don't seem to be making any headway at the moment. That is the way I see things in perspective altogether.
And that's why we have the vice president for NUP here, because we want to put all these conversations to her as the leaders that we are looking at right now. We hope that they will be able to do the right things when they eventually become the presiding officers of Uganda, or the Republic of Uganda, for that matter. I do have another clip that
On Tuesday, Deputy President William Ruto was the chief guest at the official laying of the foundation stone for a biological drugs and vaccine manufacturing facility in Uganda.
You are lucky because you have a great mentor and leader that has provided the necessary support for this investment to take place.
A visit that has attracted speculation over likely political underpinnings amid frosty relations between the DP and his boss, President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Deputy President Ruto is flexing his muscles. He is showing that he's broadening his coalition of international actors who are willing to back his bid.
Reports from the Deputy President's office indicate that Ruto was in Uganda at the invitation of President Yoweri Museveni, who hosted him for 2 days, where the two leaders also held private talks.
In Kenya, for a top civil servant or a top public servant to travel outside the country, they need to get approvals, either from the head of the public service, being ministers, or the president at the level of the presidency office. So, did Uhuru give approval for Ruto to travel?
This, however, is not the first time Ruto is visiting Uganda while in office. In 2015, he campaigned for President Museveni in Kapchorwa district in eastern Uganda, urging locals to vote back Museveni.
Young people must be at the forefront to fight for leadership that will guarantee peace and stability so that we can build our economy, expand opportunities for young people.
In August 2018, Ruto and President Museveni launched a 150-kilometer Kapchorwa-Suam road. He would later make his way back a year later in December 2019 to initiate the William Ruto African Leadership Institute at the Makerere University, again at President Museveni's invitation. Museveni later hosted Ruto at Mubende State Lodge in Kampala, where the two held talks.
Regional allies in likely contested political elections that are like the 2022 or the 2007 election, regional leadership support is very critical in resolving contentious issues that come along with any disputed election.
This speaks to a history of a long-standing relationship between the two leaders, with pundits saying this latest trip could be Ruto's tactic in seeking support from regional leaders ahead of the 2022 polls. Could this be the beginning of a series of regional engagements by Deputy President William Ruto in his quest to secure the top seat? Akisa Wandera, KTN News.
All right, of course, that's KTN News, and we give credit to their coverage. Should we expect a disputed election in 2022? Is Mr. Ruto trying to rig the election before it happens?
Well, yes, thank you, Sally. That was interesting to watch. Rewatch speculations, and to me, quite rightfully, that this is a deliberate tactic in seeking support, for his bid. He started it early, and he's very progressive, by the way, in terms of those visits, and then coming with the excuse of saying he's coming with the investors. What is he doing with investors in Uganda? Where is my sister, Honorable Anite, when it is supposed to be in her docket? I mean, some of these things are laughable, but also quite annoying, And I do not know how many citizens of Uganda and Kenya have had the opportunity to watch this clip and to interrogate these events. Because in our 2021 going forward, just fast tracking backwards, when he was in Kapchorwa, he was quoted of saying that we are lucky to have a great leader, and that he's going to guarantee peace and security for young people. Now, who are these young people when actually many of them are in jail? Many of them, should I actually? I wish I could be so lay, maybe proceed against him. Yes, because that was a blatant lie to us. First of all, his coming was unconstitutional, totally. And then he speaks about peace and security when I am keeping a number of young people whose young parents were thrown in the river. They were killed. Others, you don't even have the graves. How can he do that? So, and of course, we know the prisons are so full. The mass graves, they maim the people. Shabana Tikus, yesterday, but on Friday, I had a team that came to in solidarity with the children. They have been visiting a number of these homes and the graves and the Ritas. Rita was 22 years old. So Ruto has come, like, I don't know, I want to refrain from using my organic language on this, because sincerely, that is guaranteeing what? security for who? For the young people and employment, and where we see the unemployment levels so high. Shouldn't we really hold Ruto very accountable to his, for that? Anyway, before we even think about it, what was he first of all do? I do not think he's coming to Kapchorwa or coming here has anything to do with the citizens or the good of the citizens of Uganda or Kenya at all. To me, he came specifically to pitch himself for support. It's a very selfish, glaringly selfish visit. Series of those visits have nothing to do with the welfare or with the employment of the youth or even the people or good of Uganda. It has nothing to do with that. That is blank. So how do we proceed then? One, bringing awareness even within Uganda. Building allies. We must interest ourselves with those Kenyans who are very awake. So because now it has spilled to us, we need to make sure that we do not hold this conversation, but we must continue to pitch ourselves, to interest ourselves in terms of, how he is dragging. He's dragging that even further. So it's very important we form those alliances with the Kenyans in terms of information, in terms of awareness of the citizens. Power belongs to the people, by the way. And these people have totally hijacked that. Power belongs to the people. We shook it during the elections. You saw what people power means. Now, let the people of Kenya and the people of Uganda unite, come together, and we raise our voices in this. Power belongs to the people. People did not fear the barrel of the gun. We were sprayed and so on, but you saw how we shook with you people together.
Right. Mr. Mitala Muzukuru wa Muswagali, your thoughts on that. Why has Mr. Ruto become the default presiding officer of every important initiative that is being unveiled in Uganda? Is he realizing his dream of bringing together Jubilee and NRM, or is he just rigging the election ahead of time?
I think Mr. Ruto is a very troubled man. That's what I would start with. There is apparently there is a pact that was undertaken between him and Mr. Kenyatta at I think in the first term that Mr. Kenyatta reigned, and apparently there was an agreement that he would support Mr. Kenyatta through the presidency, through Mr. Kenyatta's 2 terms, and at the end of Mr. Kenyatta's 2 terms, then Mr. Kenyatta would back him for his turn. Kind of similar with the sorts of stories we've heard about our own queue in waiting. We've had quite a number of people who have been in the queue waiting. They are Mama and Babazis, they so and so. There's so many of them. Every one of them who has been waiting in the queue, they are probably almost dead now. If they are not dead, they have been sacked and they are sitting somewhere lamenting. So there is that pact. That allegedly was. We don't know how true it is, but if there is one, there is that issue that needs to be looked at. Has there been promises that have been broken? Probably yes, probably not. And obviously, I already have hinted, and I think everybody has already known that there is a rupture of relationships between Mr. Ruto and Mr. Kenyatta. So their relationship is not the very best. I was reading an article yesterday where somebody has actually painted a picture of a marriage, on rocks, where the husband and the wife are going their separate ways, but in between there is a third person. And I think the third person in this context is Mr. Odinga, Raila Odinga. Right. So obviously, Mr. Ruto is rattled, as his name suggests. He's under pressure. He thinks the tide doesn't seem to be riding in his favor, and therefore he's trying to do everything that he could possibly do in order to be able to preserve his chances of possibly succeeding Mr. Kenyatta. How he's going to be able to do that, especially seeing the kind of forces that he's generating back home in his own country, from even members within his own political networks who would naturally be the people who would be, he would, if I were him, these are the people I would really be talking to. You know, there's no point talking to Mr. Museveni at this point in time, because I highly doubt that Mr. Museveni can be able to influence Kenyan politics. I
don't think he's talking to Mr. Museveni because he expects him to influence Kenyan politics, but I think his mindset is building some kind of a scenario where the election happens and he's defeated by very few votes, and then he disputes the election, and they go to some sort of regional consultation. Who should be the leader? This is what my claims are. So who is going to be in that room really matters. And when Mr. Ruto, I think, allies with Mr. Museveni, he expects that when they are sitting in that room at the end of the conversation, the main voice will be that Mr. Ruto won the election, and Mr. Museveni will try to make a strong case for him. And I think that's why he continues to come to Uganda on a regular basis to consolidate that support in case there's a dispute of an election. So of course, we don't know how many regional leaders believe in Mr. Museveni, that if they finally get into that room and they are around that table, he could convince them to call the election in Mr. Ruto's name. I think that's the reason why he's trying to ally closely with Mr. Museveni. I could be wrong, but it's something to think about. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I am very, very uncomfortable with that kind of suggestion, because I think the election in any country is an election for the citizens of the country, and if there is a dispute, the issue must be, adjudicated in the country's own courts. And I think Kenyan courts have been they have kind of laid a precedent. I think within our area, within our region, the Kenyan Supreme Court, I think the Kenyan High Court was only the court that was able to cancel an election in which both Mr. Ruto and Mr. Kenyatta participated, and they declared that election null and void, and they sent the people back to the ballots.
And I think all of us should be very uncomfortable with that suggestion. But you have to understand that Kenya is one country that has been very consultative. It consults regionally and also internationally. It has the credibility to actually engage these conversations. But we also cannot forget the situation in Gambia. Remember what happened in the last elections in Gambia. That election was not resolved by the people of Gambia. It was at the end of the day, even though it was called by the people of Gambia, it was reinstated by the regional actors. And I think that's the kind of scenario that Mr. Ruto is envisioning at the moment. Again, like I said, I could be completely wrong, but I wouldn't completely rule it out.
I hope, and I'm being very sincere here, that I hope that we do not arrive at such a situation. because if we arrive at such a situation where the elections, be it in Kenya, in Tanzania, in South Sudan, or even in Rwanda, Burundi, even in Congo, that the elections, if there's an electoral dispute, and that dispute is going to be resolved by Mr. Museveni, I really hope that we do not arrive at that point, because I think it will be disastrous, for
that would be disastrous indeed. Welcome back, Dr. Zedriga, and I'm sorry that you keep breaking off.
Yeah,
my network is so bad, so it is frustrating, but it's not the first time it happens. Yeah.
Hopefully, when you become the next vice president of Uganda, we shall have a better
absolutely clear network.
Before you bring
no
back
sabotage.
Before you bring back Dr. Zedriga in this conversation, I've read somewhere where somebody has said that actually Mr. Ruto lacks tact. And also the other thing that has been said is that he's been disrespectful of his president. Because he positions himself when he goes on these trips, you see him speaking as if the final decision rests with him, but the final decision does not rest with him.
Right.
Because the curse. Have you heard about the curse of the vice president?
Yes. I know.
The curse of the vice president,
Yes.
So Mr. Ruto also suffers from that. He's got the curse of the president walking around with him. Because he might put on a show. He might talk eloquently. He might be able to do all these things, which kind of reflect maybe nicely on him, maybe for his own personal feel-good factor. But at the end of the day, the person who really has executive authority is the president.
Right.
And I think Mr. Ruto needs to understand that, when he goes on these adventures that he goes to, if he's not going there to represent the president of Kenya, then in what capacity is he there? That's the question I asked earlier, that when Mr. Ruto goes to these adventures that he goes on to, who is he representing there? Is he taking his own personal interests there, or is he carrying the interests of the people of Kenya with him? Because that's kind of distorted at the moment. And this is where it intersects, with the political sleaze that I talked about earlier, where you got people in leadership, people in government, aligning themselves with business interests and financial interests, and they are going, and it's corruption. At its best, it's corruption. This is corruption.
Yeah.
And it should be called out for what it is. And I think Mr. Ruto has found a place where he's possibly comfortable to do things of the kind, because it's the way of business in Uganda. The president has always kept a blind eye when his network of politically corrupt people have been pointed out to him. He's kept a blind eye. Even at the expense of the institutions he has instigated to be able to investigate this kind of unhealthy practices. We have people who are currently serving as cabinet ministers whose character, I don't want to mention names here because for obvious reasons I wouldn't be able to name. But we have people who are serving in government.
Dr. Lina,
they are recorded.
Learn from my experience.
These things have been raised. They have been investigated by the Inspector Generals of Government, by whoever. Reports have come up. They have been given to the president. He's sat on them, because they are his people. He's the grandfather of corruption. So perhaps
let's hear from Dr. Zedriga. What are your thoughts on this perspective? Do you think Mr. Ruto is speaking for himself or for the government of Kenya? Do we have cause to worry about his relationship with Mr. Museveni?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think 9 out of 10, in my view and experiences, he is actually speaking for himself. Because I had the opportunity of watching another clip where he was saying at least now he is distancing himself from Kenya and the leadership. There's a clip I've also watched. So he is more positioning and advancing himself as deputy president, as Ruto. But the personal is political, and the political is personal.
Right.
And yes, the personal is political and the political is personal.
Right.
So in so pitching himself as Ruto and his interests as Ruto, he is also looking and eyeing the office of the presidency. So there's a very thin line actually, but then what comes out of his mouth and the invitations, and also just for on record, he's sneaking in and out. You know, there have been lots of discussions around that, and it is on record. Then, if it was in the best interest of Kenya, he would follow the correct path. Sneaking and then getting, you know, arrested at the airport, if I may use that word, for lack of other, being blocked at the airport as a whole vice president, when the guidelines are very, 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 very clear, you know? So he needs that clearance and he's not getting it. Why is he not, you know, submitting to that whole doctrine and practice of collective responsibility? Why? Why is he not, you know, seeking that blessing actually? When Uhuru Kenyatta, His Excellency, was going to ICC, on the camera, he handed it to Ruto. So to whom is he handing as vice president when he's now coming to Uganda? He actually come with the vice presidency without handing over to anybody. And that's why the Kenyans are saying he's coming as their vice president, so they need to be in charge of his security. So there's a very thin line, and it actually also calls, as my colleague has rightfully said, for lack of accountability, you know, disrespect, and also, you know, not submitting to this issue of collective responsibility and transparency and respect for the office. And of course, the personal interests override the interest of him or the interest of the Kenyans. That one is very glaring. And for reasons, I think also a lot of it is the timing now, going towards the elections. Yes, so he would like to secure as much as possible, and amass you know, solidarity, you know, so that he cushions himself with that support and guarantee. You know, when you are going to court, you have to go with sureties. You have to get, so he's getting his surety. Right. In political surety in the neighborhood without the risk of again being misquoted. So in my view, and also in what you know, it's a more personal interest of a do or die transactional political posturing. Yeah.
But during our very recently concluded elections, you know, I saw Mr. Museveni so angry on quite a number of occasions where he was alleging that there was a foreign country that was involved in unsettling the politics of democratic practice of Uganda. So, I mean, where does that leave us when we have a full vice president of a different country going into another territory in his capacity as vice president, standing on a podium, campaigning for another president or another candidate in a national election? What does that really mean? I think that's really, it's I would say that it's naive. I would say that it's myopic. I would say that it's very unsincere, and it's lack of judgment. You know, Mr. Ruto should know himself that the Kenyans are kind of sophisticated. Kenya is I already said here that I consider Kenya to be a more sophisticated kind of you know, a democratic arrangement than ourselves, and lucky for them, and to their credit, they still have their constitutional term limits, which we don't have. You know, these things are in constitutions to secure, save the country, to secure and save nation states from those sorts of you know, human kind of you know, deficiencies. Because I mean, we are all human beings. We all have ambitions. There are all things. All of us. There are things that we would like to do, but you do those things within the limits of what is legally permissible. Because whenever you go outside the barometers of what is legally permissible, then you become you are then engaging in something what we lawyers call something that's called atras bias. You know, something that's also bias. What is. So there are serious issues there, and I think if Mr. Ruto should be taking his message to the Kenyan people, If he wants to do business, if he wants to be an investor in Uganda, that's fair enough. I don't think there's anything that stops him from being an investor in Uganda. The only problem is that I've again read, just before we came on air, I was going through combing some information, and in his own words, he agrees that he's been a frontman for a certain bank, for a certain businessman who wanted to do business in Kampala, and therefore he was a frontman. And to the very point that he acknowledges Mr. Ruto, these are not words that are put in his mouth, but these are words that he himself spoken when he's been questioned by the Kenyan press, that he assisted a businessman to acquire a loan to invest in a different country. And this is where the Kenyans are asking, does it Kenya having their deputy chief executive, touting business for another country when even Kenya has got the same needs? That's kind of contradictory, really,
Right.
It's very contradictory. It doesn't make sense for anybody, either whether for political reasons or whether for economic reasons or for whatever reasons that somebody would want to pay them to be. It just doesn't make sense. For me, this is why I'm asking that when Mr. Ruto is doing all the things that he's doing, who is he representing? Is he representing the people of Kenya, or is he representing himself? Because if he's representing himself, that needs to be clear and needs to be clearly cut out that he's doing business as Mr. Ruto, who is entitled as a human being to run and own businesses, and therefore there's no problem with that. But if he's carrying the weight of the vice president of Kenya to do whatever he's doing, then that's fundamentally flawed and it's wrong and it should be rejected completely, period.
And all these questions have been on the minds of many Kenyan politicians, as indicated in this video.
Particular aborted trip, the Orange Democratic Movement Party wants the Deputy President William Ruto to come clear over his relationship with Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni and an alleged Turkish investor. The leaders are questioning what they claim is DP's frequent trips to Uganda instead of building the Kenyan economy.
The leadership of the Orange Democratic Movement in Parliament claims the Deputy President William Ruto aborted trip to Uganda was a sympathy-seeking circus. Speaking at Parliament buildings, the ODM MPs claimed they were suspicious of the DP's relationship with Uganda.
We want to ask him to share with Kenyans what ideals he is borrowing from NRM, the National Resistance Movement. We are not bothered with whether Ruto was cleared or not. We are bothered with his relationship with Uganda, and we are bothered with what he's going to do in Uganda.
They further challenged Ruto to explain his relationship with Uganda's ruling party, National Resistance Movement, and reason of taking foreign investors to a neighboring country.
And he has been telling us that bottom up. I want to bring bottom up here. I want to bring investors here. I want to do youth employment. I want to alleviate problems of the youth, and you are taking the investors who are supposed to employ Kenyans here to Uganda.
If you are the deputy president of a country, how on earth would you claim to be taking investors to another nation, to another state? That is completely a sign of lack of patriotism.
However, Kapseret MP Oscar Sudi, who was to join the DP in the trip, said that the mission was for benchmarking.
Tumeenda benchmarking kwa chama Museveni kama mara 3. Na kuna kazi tunaendelesha huko. Sisi tunataka tujenge chama kama ile ilikuwa ya Jubilee, lakini kwa style zingine tofauti.
Saa hizi wanasema ati mimi kufaa yellow, I'm associated with the flag of Uganda, or UDA is associated with the flag of Uganda.
This was a private visit to Uganda, and I want to believe that the Deputy President was not using resources from the government. He was using his own personal resources.
Sudi defended Harun Aydin, the Turkish investor branded a terrorist, saying he is an investor who has interest in the horticulture industry.
Wao ni wanabiashara wakubwa wa kubadilisha mambo kama maneno ya avocado na hizi vitu zingine zote mnaona tunajaribu kubadilisha.
Suleiman Yeri, Prime Edition.
Right. Of course, that was from KBC. another Kenyan channel. They are alluding to some of the allegations you're talking about, Mr. Mitala, because the so-called Turkish investor who is also labeled a terrorist. Your thoughts on that, Mr. Mitala?
I kind of missed because my phone was a bit cracking up. I missed that asking, but I've seen the clip there, and obviously that's exactly what I was talking about previously in my previous statement. That it kind of raises quite very serious issues when you have the deputy chief executive of an organization who is running behind it to go and do business with another company. I think that's a conflict of interest, and I think Kenyans are right in their mind to question those kind of things. But I think for me, and I did mention here that if you look at the website of that organization that I referenced earlier, Financial Anti-Money Laundering Action Group, FAA or something like that. Both countries, you can look at both countries and see for yourself. They on one hand, Uganda is citing serious deficiencies in its anti-money laundering processes. These include areas like lack of proper administrative structures, law enforcement, the running of financial intelligence and things like that. Measures that are supposed to be in place to be able to identify money laundering kind of practices at an earlier stage. The other thing here, I think, where Uganda is being highlighted as having a problem is the ability to carry out due diligence on people who want to do trade in the country. So those are some of the things that possibly create, an environment in which the likes of Ruto and group feel that they can possibly be much more accommodated, or maybe they can go under the radar undetected. Quite not easy to detect them. Whereas if they did something of the same kind, maybe to beef up to so much scrutiny within Kenya, because it's really questionable, as somebody in the position of where Mr. Ruto is, he's got access to intelligence. He's got access to so many, things that would enable him to make informed decisions, to enable him, come to the right judgment of situations. If you're dealing with a person who is being alleged to be a financier of terrorism and financial crimes, and there are so many things that go around that tag,
Right.
I think as the vice president of the country, you'd be worried. In so many other countries, suspicion of foul play for a person of Mr. Ruto's caliber would possibly indicate, total dismantling his political career.
Right.
That he's not being careful when he's dealing with such very sensitive issues that he knows are capable of derailing his political career and his presidential ambition. I think for me, it indicates a man who lacks judgment, and maybe for that matter, he is not possibly the right person even to put himself forward as the president of the country, because we've got to learn from examples. The reason why we study history, or not even history, the reason why you use information is to be able to weigh up, and come to the right conclusions. There has been lots of noise that has been made around people like Jacob Zuma, and how he got trapped into these political sleaze, into that cocoons of networks of mafias, corrupt, sordid people who are capturing states, for their self-enrichment and the enrichment of their families and the expense of the public good, Well, we've seen, former presidents in Hong Kong and their sons, their daughters or their relations being convicted for crimes related to financial impropriety, while they are in office. We've seen these things happen in Italy. come back to the continent, back home, I think there's a son of a president. Currently he's the I think it's Sassou Nguesso or something like that, but he's a son of a president and he's a vice president. And he's been named, you know, for being involved in money laundering kind of schemes. Now, doesn't really Ruto care about his reputation? And how does he think he's going to be able to come up as a credible candidate for presidency when those kind of things are tagging around his back? I think for me, that's a sign of lack of judgment, it's a sign of lack of tact. And for that matter, I think maybe he should carefully consider whether he's actually the right person to be putting himself forward to run for the presidency of the country.
Dr. Zedriga, do you think Mr. Ruto has poor judgment, or is he just a strategic politician? The internet is bothering here, I think.
This guy of
do you hear me? Dr. Zedriga, do you hear me?
And yet it is.
Doctor, do you hear us? Dr. Zedriga, do you hear us? You seem to hear us, but there's no response. I'm not sure what's going on. Not sure what's going on. Dr. Lina, do you hear us? Do you hear me?
Dr. Zedriga is distracted by a meeting.
Yeah. So I guess you're gonna have to answer that question again. This is interesting. So you're saying that he has poor judgment.
In my opinion, I think that's a classic show.
Yeah. So some people think that he's just a strategic politician. I don't know how to navigate that conversation.
I think when you are, I mean, Mr. Ruto is not new on the political scene. I think he's been there for close to 10 years now, isn't it?
He's just 10 years?
Yeah.
10
well,
years
actually, much more than that. I mean,
yeah, much more than that.
He was Secretary General of the Kenya African National Independence Party before it collapsed. So he's a man who is very knowledgeable. He knows lots of things. I mean, you cannot discredit the man for having an ambition. That's perfectly legit. You know, I wouldn't really beat him for having an ambition. And I think when you do listen to him, you know, he comes across like a man who is very knowledgeable. He's calm. Maybe he can be able to, you know, nurture those kind of.
He's a brilliant man. There's no doubt about that.
And maybe for that matter, it's natural for him to be able to nurture those kind of relations, which are very vital. Actually, expanding your networks in terms of putting yourself in a strategic position if you want to go somewhere. But having said that, I think, and I've said this here before, that you know, whenever matters that have got to do with the public interest, because I think the sort of things that Mr. Ruto actually is playing about with have got an element of national security as well.
Right.
Yeah. Because in his position and you know, going off on these adventures without clearance from you know, from the people who are supposed to give him clearance, it comes to question. Really, it's got to be questionable.
Right.
I mean, let's break it down in simple terms. You know? Suppose you wanted to take leave of absence from your workplace. Do you just walk away, or do you request you go through the formal channels?
You have to go through the formal channels, of course.
So what makes Mr. Ruto think that he can circumvent, all the other systems and processes because he's vice president and go his way without any repercussions? What makes him really think about that? Because one of the things that we have been crying about.
Even hand over.
One of the things we've been crying about.
And you hand over.
This lack of institutions that can outlive individuals. The reason why you have a civil service is that because those processes are supposed to be streamlined and they function in a particular way. Now, as vice president, he ought to know that. He really ought to know that. And I think this is why, for me, I agree with people who are saying that he's disrespectful of the president. And you cannot be disrespectful of the person who's got authority over you. So I think that is a mistake, and I think that's where I come to the conclusion that this is not it's not about being strategic, but it's about being naive and maybe lack of strategy.
Yeah, so it makes me wonder really how a person who has been in the political arena for several decades could be so naive to the extent that fostering such relationships publicly, that he cannot fathom or understand the fact that trying to foster such relationships very openly could potentially get you in trouble. What are your thoughts about the other political leaders in Kenya? Do you think it's justified for them to isolate him? Recently, they had a leadership meeting with Mr. Ruto. No, not Mr. Ruto. With Mr. Kenyatta, Mr. Raila Odinga, and other political leaders. In which meeting he was not invited. Do you think it's reasonable? Is it justified for them to isolate him?
I think in terms of political kind of negotiation.
And of course, in that meeting, all other leaders agreed to endorse Mr. Raila Odinga for president.
So I think one of the things that we need to understand is that the alliance that brought Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Ruto into government was more kind of an alliance of convenience. It wasn't an alliance that came around because they fundamentally, agreed in principle, on ideology, and on a number of other things. They are completely two different kind of candidates, who were kind of merged together out of a convenience. And I think that convenience was kind of given force, a bit more force, because of, at the time, we had the prospect of the International Criminal Court, going against the president, or actually both of them. So they aligned themselves together. But the problem is that the verdict from the International Criminal Court that came out, and I challenge you to go and read that verdict for yourself, the judges were very clear that this was not an acquittal, So essentially, they did not pronounce that Mr. Ruto and Mr. Kenyatta were not guilty of the offense against which they were charged. And that has left about the prospect that these charges could be resurrected at a future date. Because what actually happened was that there was tampering there was witness intimidation. And that's a very serious allegation.
Right.
For somebody for an allegation of such a kind to come on your head that you've tampered with witnesses in a court, in a judicial process, that's a very, very serious allegation. You can go and read the judgment by yourself. I can give you the references there. So in that kind of background, Mr. Ruto is in bad space. But very quickly, because I know Dr. Zedriga might want to come in very quickly before we call it a day. There is also the problem of the longevity of Mr. Museveni in the politics of East Africa, because the longer he stayed around, the more vulnerable and more exposed that he has become. Because people can read Mr. Museveni. People can be able to predict what possibly he's thinking about and what his next strategy is. You know? So all those kind of things, they are not working in the favor of Mr. Ruto at the moment. This is why I'm saying that he's exposed himself as a politically naive player, where he actually would have had an advantage, and I think that's likely to derail him. But I could be wrong. At the end of the day, today is not the same as tomorrow. The man might bounce back, and we might have Ruto as president in 2022. Who knows?
We shall be looking out for those results when they come. Dr. Zedriga, are you able to hear us now?
Yes, these are the realities for us here in Uganda. Even I had to relocate somewhere under. You have to look for the network, even the router, you change it everywhere. But anyway, that notwithstanding, what really does this cosy relationship between Ruto and Museveni mean for Kenyans, and what should Ugandans learn from it? What should Kenyans learn from it? One, we need to be able to interrogate it. Thank you so much, Henry, for giving us this space that we are beginning to reflect on this, that actually our reality now goes beyond just the 2021 elections and stuff. Okay? So we need to be now more, all our antennas must be out. Two, building alliances, of course, with these like-minded people, and holding these conversations beyond the online, taking it civic education, civic participation, regional knowledge about what is happening, what should come, and is very critical. Power belongs to the people, but now we are powerless. So these are conversations and spaces and times when we need to continue to reinvigorate and implement that power belonging to the people. You saw it during the elections. So how do we then make sure that we link up with the teams from Kenya in terms of civic participation, education, information, and so on? Because if the two and beyond are linking, how about the people? Well, let's look at the East African community. This whole regional integration, the EU and so on. But in the interest of time, I'll remain the East African community. And we even had the international conference on the Great Lakes region. I have not within it heard about political integration. You know, all these are, you know, very, in my considered view, very personal, very selfish, you know, interest that Deputy President Ruto is advancing, and therefore our space as the citizens, and concerned citizens for regional peace and security, which he mentioned in Kapuchora. It's not a favor. It's not a crime for us to be participating in these conversations and holding it even across the borders, especially now with the online and communication, digital communications, and documenting these realities. Thank you, my colleague. Thank you so much, because you gave us very good insights in terms of what is there on the online, and of course the international community in terms of the ICC realities in context. We also need to be interesting. Yes, the ICC from 2006.
We have Kenyans following this conversation. We have Kenyans following these conversations. What do you tell them to do right now as these conversations continue?
One, document these realities and question, and continue to question. Two, we need, as Kenyans, the grassroots participation and people power in practice in all these realities is very, very, very critical, because we wouldn't want you to have even a tenth of what we have gone through and what we are going through as Ugandans here. Prevention is better than cure. Information is power, and sharing information is empowerment. So let us have our power and share in terms of empowering ourselves, the information, the realities, and we continue to be very resilient. That is what I can say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zedriga. Mitala Muzukulu wa Mswangali. As we wrap up in 2 minutes,
yeah,
what are your thoughts as you wrap up this conversation? And also, why is it that no political leaders in Uganda have spoken about this conversation yet?
You see?
I really don't know. I mean, I cannot speak on behalf of the Ugandan political elite and why they have not taken up this matter with interest. I hope they will be interested. Maybe if they see some of the things we say here, they might become interested and begin, paying a little bit of critical attention, to examine what is really what is beneath, these alliances of convenience. You talked about the East African community. I am in favor of the East African community. I hold the East African passport. I proudly say that. I think there is every benefit of having, people have married people from Tanzania, from Zimbabwe, and I know people. I work with a lovely Kenyan girl who is a very good friend of mine. She's a brilliant. So there is every,
now you are talking.
there is every benefit of. I've got a very friend of mine who is from Tanzania. We text each other. We talk about the problems of Mr. Museveni and how we compare, with our Uganda and Tanzania situation. Yeah. So there is that beauty of people interacting beyond our borders. That there's no question about that. But as Zedriga rightly points out, I don't think that people are interested in a political kind of military kind of union. I don't think that what the people of East Africa are looking for. The people of East Africa, they are looking at integration at a social and economic level.
Yes.
Not to surrender their political liberties, not to surrender their political systems and administrative structures. And for people in Kenya or elsewhere who are watching and following this would be my final piece of advice. The Kenyans, they should remember that they went through a rough period with President Arap Moi. And they know the sacrifices they paid to come out of that period. They know the sacrifices they paid. They know the adjustments they had to make to enable Mr. Moi to leave power so that the country can be able to go ahead. And I think some of us from your brothers from other mothers from the other end have always looked at you with pride. So you should be careful. You should be extremely careful not to allow your systems to degenerate into the one-man kind of one strong man systems that we have in Uganda. That's what our problem is, and that's what needs to be resisted.
Dr. Zedriga, as you wrap up in 1 minute.
Yes, to our brothers and sisters in Kenya, my fellow citizens in Uganda, and even those in Tanzania, we should not take our civic participation, when there's a bit of space for you Kenyans, don't take it for granted. Guard it very jealously. Guard it and protect it. The constitutionalism, the recommendations of the Waki Commission report that you implemented, whereby your current president came to office as the president. You know what you've sacrificed and what you went through. We have admired your courage. We have admired how your systems still work. Protect that. Do not take it for granted. Therefore, interest yourself in terms of the civic participation. It is not going to be a by the way. Let it be your duty and your commitment. that you owe to two categories of people: those who have perished and died, and those that are not yet born. You owe it in trust. Protect that space and the participation. Do not take it for granted. To those in Tanzania, we empathize with you. It's even said that together we stand, and divided we fall. You have seen how the positioning is in the interest of an individual or two individuals to the detriment of the majority of the citizens. Please, let us not keep quiet. Let us not cover ourselves with blankets. There is no time for sleeping right now. There is a time to be on our feet. There is a time to ensure that the participation, what is reflected in the elections, is the aspiration of the citizens of Kenya. And we from Uganda will be very proud if that is delivered. And if there's anything else we can do, especially spaces like this, please do not hesitate to come to us. Because when your neighbor's house is on fire, do not fold your hands, because that fire may cross to you. Let us make sure this fire, first of all, is prevented. It has already been paid by the lives and the blood of the many who died. We do not want it to be repeated. And do not take this security, peace and security, civic space, civic participation, which you people have implemented progressively. The constitutionalism you have implemented progressively. After the Working Commission report, do not take it for granted. Please protect it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is the State of the Nation. This conversation will be coming back. It is an ongoing conversation.
Please proceed.
Kenyans,
thank you so much.
The Kenyans in
Thank
Nairobi,
you.
or wherever you are, we welcome you to this State of the Nation dialogue. We have conversations that are pertaining to political situations in Uganda, but because we are in the region together and people are talking integration, we thought that it would be important for us to discuss Ruto's relationship. The Kenyans, we urge you to hold on to your democracy that you have, to dismiss any tendencies of dictatorship within your country, to ensure that you dismiss any kind of one-man rule in your country. So we hope that you will do the right decision. But at the end of the day, thank you so much for joining us. This is the State of the Nation.
This is the State of the Nation. Irifa Mubanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The State of the Nation with Henry SSALI.